You're good.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Daf Yomi, Maseches Eruvin. So we left off yesterday at the bottom of Yudam and Beis. So we left off by the two dots, which was a quote from the Mishnah of basically 10 blot earlier. So it says over there, Im yesh lo tzuras haPesach, af al pi sherochav me'eser einot tzarich lamayit. So we discussed that the mavui can only be have an opening of 10 amos or less. And if it's more, it's no good. But says the Mishnah, right, which we'll soon see there's an opinion, and which will be Rav, which will disagree, right, that even though if there is a tzuras haPesach, if there is a door frame, which we'll describe later on, basically as two side posts with a lentil on top. So there's a tzuras haPesach, afal pisha, even though it's wider than 10, it's fine because it has the doorway. So therefore it's visually okay, and therefore it's a separation between the mavui and the shus rabba. So Zok the Gemara two lines at the bottom. Ashkan tzuras haPesach the bahanya berachvo of amalatra to bahanya begavo. So we find, the Mishnah, that tzuras haPesach works when it comes to the width, and when it comes to the height, we mentioned earlier, like a week ago, right? If it's too high, it's no good. But if it's too high and there's like design above, we learned from the Heichal, that will be okay. What about the opposite? What about if you have a design on the sides, right? For the width, right? Then it's okay. And then, or you have, a tzuras haPesach above 20 amos. Does that work or not? So, what's the halacha there? So, Tashma, come and listen. The tiny of the Nerd so it says, Mavui shu gavo me'esrim amma yimait. If a mavui has a korah which is higher than 20 amos, you have to lower it down. If you don't have tzuras haPesach, if it has a tzuras haPesach, then you do not have to lower it. So you see clearly that a tzuras haPesach also works in terms of the height. So if you have something which is 25 high, but there's a definite tzuras haPesach, it's not just a beam, there's lentils and a side post, then it'll be okay. And amalasha berachlo mai. What about the other case? The case of basically the design for the width. So Tashma, come listen. The tiny learner writes, "Mavu shugavo me'esrim amma yimait, v'haracha me'eser yimait." So if it's too high, then if it's higher than 20 amos, you have to lower it down. And if it's wider than 10, you have to go ahead and minimize it. And if it has a tzuras haPesach, if it has a door frame, then you don't have to go ahead and minimize it. And if it has the design, you don't have to go ahead and minimize it either. So the Gemara says, "My lava seifa is the seifa." In other words, basically, there's two cases, and therefore the second thing listed goes on the second case. So therefore, the amalatra is going on the width to say that perhaps the width is can be as long as the design, you don't need to minimize it to be less than 10 amos. The Gemara says, "No, maybe it's going reisha masni lo." No, maybe it's going on the reisha. So Masni lo Rav Yehuda l'chia bar Rav Kamei de Rav. So says Rav Yehuda l'chia bar Rav Kamei de Rav. Ein tzarich lamayit. If it has a what's it called, a tzuras haPesach, you don't have to go ahead and bring it in. And Amar le asnia tzarich lamayit. So says Rav, who disagrees with our Mishnah, as we're soon going to see the shita through for the next number of pieces going down. According to Rav, so that no, even if something has a tzuras haPesach, right, you still have to go ahead and minimize it. Tzuras haPesach does not help you with a width that's above, that's more than 10 amos wide. And Amar Rav Yosef says, Rav Yosef Medivrei Rabbeinu Nilmad, from the words of Rabbi, learn out Chatzir Sharuba Psachim v'Chaloinos Eina Niteres b'Tzuras haPesach. You have a chatzir, right, which is full of psachim and chaloinos. It's full of entranceways, right, and windows, right. So if you look at this, those of you have the picture in the art scroll, right? So the difference basically is, see the picture here, right? So the difference between a window is basically something that both a window and entrance frame have a roof, just the window, it's not off the ground. You can't walk through it because it's a window, but there was no glass there or nothing filled in there. It was open space in a square, or an entranceway is no bottom, just open space like that. So if you have a bunch of, windows, openings, combining entrances and windows, it does not permit it tzuras haPesach. My time, but what's the reason? So ho'il v'yaiser meser aiser b'mavui. Since we have two rules, right? First rule is you have something which is, if you have an opening more than 10, is no good. And also, if you have something which is paratz meruba loimid, if you have more openings, then closing is no good by a chatzir. In other words, if you have a fence and more of the fence is down than up, it's no good. Even if you don't have the openings, even though you don't have a single opening more than 10, but if you combine all the openings, it's 55% of the fence, it's no good. So just like by more than 10, according to Rav, who holds that if you have an opening more than 10, Tzorus Pesach doesn't help. So to a Tzorus Pesach, even if you have a Tzorus Pesach above each and every single window and entranceway, nevertheless, that shouldn't help Lafi Rav. Says the Gemara, so Gemara says no. So maybe you can't say it too, because maybe if you talk about something which is more than 10 amos, so maybe something which is more than 10 is different by a mavui, right? So in the case of mavui, there is no heter, right? Since there's no heti by the case of pasiviros, Rameir. So Rameir, we talked about pasiviros when people used to travel to Eretz Yisrael. And Shabbos for Ola Regel. So before, they were traveling, they would have a well there in order to draw the water. They would basically put 4, L-shaped walls in the corners in order sort of like the area would be sort of squared off with the well in the middle. And therefore, they'd be able to draw. It wouldn't be considered to be from a Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. They'd separate it. Now, you can't have between the L brackets, according to a mayor, more than 10. So since more than 10 was not permitted when it came to pasiviros, even though, right, talking about Paras and Rubal Ayman, but so the Isser of 10 was not lifted over there, but the Isser of Paratz Merula Alimid was lifted over there. In other words, you can have more openings than closings because between the L-shaped walls was more open than just the L-shaped walls themselves. So despite the fact that there was more open, it was okay. So maybe that is okay. So maybe at Tzorus Pesach does cure the more openings. So if you have multiple windows and entranceways, as long as you have a Tzorus Pesach over each and every one, maybe that would fix that case, despite the fact that Tzorus Pesach will not fix an entranceway, which is more than 10 amos. So let's say we have a proof. The fanos halu sharuban psachim v'cholonis mutter. So these walls, right? If most of them were psach entranceways and windows, is mutter. Uvachia aymin murel parts. As long as you have more than standing than open. So the Gemara says sharuban sakadaisa. What are you talking about? I mean, you just said, right? We're talking about a case where the majority is not there, right? The majority is open space and not walls. So how can you do that? So elo ema shariba behem psach v'cholonis. Rather, it means we're talking about a wall which there is a lot of windows and entranceways. Uvachi aymin murel parts, right? And the condition is that as long as there's more amida murava parrots, right, then the Tzorus Pesach will work. And therefore, if you have more standing, so then it'll be okay. And so Amar Rav Kana, so Kitanya hi b'pizchei shimi. Maybe over there we're talking about it would work. In other words, which wouldn't work as a Tzorus Pesach. It was talking about this types of entranceways of pizchei shimai. And my Pischei Shemai, so playing about Rab Rachumi v'Rav Yosef, Chadamar Delesle Shekifi, v'Chadamar Delesle Tigra. It means basically it was once upon a wall, and it was broken out. It was broken out. So some say that there are no side posts, right? There's those of you just imagine the brick that's on the bottom, that little picture on the bottom. So that's what it's referring to, right? So therefore, there is no side posts. So therefore, no. There, and the other one is talking about the case there is nothing. There's no lentil going across on top. And maybe it's sort of, staggered on top and it's not a real top. And therefore over there, in such a case, the Tzorus Pesach doesn't work there only because it's not a real entranceway. And therefore you have to have more Amid ala Parutz. But in a normal case, maybe where there was regular openings and not an opening like this, right, without side posts and without entrance like this, that perhaps the Tzorus Pesach would work. So therefore perhaps that is not a good proof. And even Rabbi Yochanan holds like that of Rav, who holds that once again that a Tzorus Pesach, right? Rav argues with Mishnah that Tzorus Pesach does not cure an entrance which is wider than 10 amos. What's the case? One time there was a mice with someone from the Bika, right? The valley of Beis Chorasan. So he put 4 poles in the corners of a field. And what do you do with those corners? And he took a vine, right? He brought a vine from the ground and he stretched it off. So it went up, the pole, across the pole, all the way around. And he went there. He said, okay, now, so we have, poles across. That reminds of us of a Tzuras HaPesach. So the question is now, two questions. It's going to be, so there's C. So they said, first of all, this is considered a wall, a separation, right? And therefore, it's like two different fields because you have this wall, right? It's like a Tzuras HaPesach, right? And obviously, this wall is more open. Nevertheless, since there's the vines going across, it makes it like a Tzuras HaPesach. And therefore, when it comes to kiloim, you can go ahead on one side of the pole plant grapes, and the other side, vine, and the other side wheat, right? So Reish Lakish is going to be more the Mekel opinion with two different versions, right? So Reish Lakish says, and just like Kilayim is considered a wall, so too by Shabbos it's considered to be a wall. Okay? Now, in Rabbi Yochanan, Omer le Kilayim yitir lo, leading Shabbos lo yitir lo. It says Kilayim works. I agree with you, but by Shabbos, I argue with you. This Tzuras HaPesach does not work. Now, the question is, what type of space are we talking about over here? Now,
Wait, so if you build the wall, then you don't have to have that 4 amos separation between one min and another min for Kalayim?
It's considered
they just can like be closer.
Just like if there was a fence, they would have the same halach ramifications. If there was a fence there, so too that's how this pole is working, right? The fence, right? Because you're going to argue, it grows in the ground, right? But the fence also, the fences, don't go into the ground, right? So it works halachically the same as the fence, right? It could be that you can't grow up into the fence. That's something else. But basically, this wall works as a wall when it comes to kilayim. So, in other words, you separate differently if you're in the same field as if you separate as if it was on two sides of a fence, and therefore this stands basically as a fence. Now, b'mai askina. So now, what case are we talking about here? If we're talking about when instead of putting the vines on top of the poles, rather they put on the sides of the poles, right? Right, so we can't Tzuras HaPesach if the vine is the halfway point in the poles. That's not considered to be a Tzuras HaPesach. Rather, we must be talking about where the vines are on top of the poles. Now, what case we're talking about? How far are the poles from one another? If we're talking about that they're 10 amos or less, why would Rabbi Yochanan say Shabbos doesn't work, right? If you have an entrance of, let's say, 8 amos with the Tzuras HaPesach, it definitely should be a wall. Elav, but yes, rather it must be the machlokas over there must be talking about, let's say, there are 15 amos, and over there Reish Lakish says it's mutter, because the Reish Lakish would hold that the Tzuras HaPesach helps for something which is larger than 10 amos. Rabbi Yochanan would say it's usher because Rabbi Yochanan holds that it's Tzuras HaPesach, even though you have a Tzuras HaPesach, if it's more than 10 amos, it doesn't help. So the says low. Yel investor, maybe it's even less than 10. And we're talking about minatzad, we're talking about the side of Rav Chizda, Kamiflagi, and they're actually machlokes says Rav Chizda, right? Rav Chizda says a Tzuras HaPesach minatzad doesn't work. It's a machlokes, right? According to Reish Lakish, it would work. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it would not work. The Rami, the Rabbi Yochanan, the Rami, the Reish Lakish, the Reish Lakish. We're going to have a stira in both Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish for another brisa. All right, for another case, excuse me, right? So what's the other case there? The Omer Reish Lakish, Mishum Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Chanina, it says Reish Lakish in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Chanina. So it says Pia Muteres Leidan Kilayim. All right, Pia is sort of like a wound, right? A wound vine is Muter Leidan Kilayim Aval Lo L'Shabbos. So now remember, the previous Reish Lakish said the vine on top of the poles, Muter for Shabbos, Muter Kilayim. Over here, he seems to say it's mutter, right? The vine is mutter for kilayim, but it's aser Shabbos. And Rabbi Yochanan Amar, mechitzas l'Shabbos delo, kach mechitzas l'kilayim delo. Just like Shabbos doesn't work, so tikilayim doesn't work. So over here, Rabbi Yochanan is also more machmir, right? Both these cases are more machmir. Reish Lakish, the other case, said both mutter. Over here, he says no, kilayim is mutter, Shabbos is aser. And over there, Rabbi Yochanan says kilayim is mutter, Shabbos is aser. And over here, he's saying aser. So it's a stira both in Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish if they're talking about the same case. But obviously, to answer that to the Gemara, we have to say it's different scenarios. So the Gemara says, Bishlam Reish Lakish like Kasha. Maybe you can say it's not a contradiction between Reish Lakish. Why? How did Rabbi? Maybe over there he was talking about his opinion. And over here, right, if you look at the bottom, he was quoting in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Chanina, corner of Rabbi Chanina, then the Shabbos is usher. So fine. It's El Rabbi Yechon, Rabbi Yechon Kasher. But it's a steer in Rabbi Yechon. So Imar to be Shlomo Hasam Al Gabon Hachamin Atzad Shapir. I understand if you're saying, okay, the situations are different. Over there was talking about on top. So on top is regarding Kilayim, it's still considered a wall. But over here, since it's on the sides, by Kilayim, it's not considered a wall. Eli Marta Idi Vida Minatzad Ma'ikil Meimer. But if you hold they're both on top. Then, excuse me, if you hold over there was talking about minat sad, like we wanted to say before. So then, what's the? How can you answer up Rabbi Yochanan? So Gemara says, "L'yelam idim minat sad." Really, you can't say it's minat sad. So you're going to say. So what's the difference? So hasam b'yaser, hacha b'yaser b'yaser. Over there was less than 10. Less than 10. That's why we're coming to kilayim. The Tzarsa Pesach works. But over here, since it's more than 10, it won't work. For Shabbos and won't work for Kilayim. Umina Tema Deshani Lei Bein Asr LeYasim Asr. And from where do we see there's a difference, right, between 10 and more than 10 when it comes to Kilayim? Because that was an afkamin over there. Because remember, both cases he said it's not a wall when it comes to Shabbos. Tzarsa Pesach never works for Shabbos, right? The only case by Kilayim it works if it's less than 10. So where do you know that? So one that Rabbi Yechon said Shlakish loy kachaya ma'isa, right? They did not have Shahalach Rabbi Yeshua ate. So Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri l'Motayra, and he went to go ahead to learn by Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri. Afapisha baki b'chas kilayim. So even though he was a baki in the hilchos kilayim, he went to go ahead and learn by him. Umatzah sheyeshe ben ilanos. He saw he was sitting by some trees. Mazach zemayra me'ilam milan, and he had a vine, right, going from one tree to the other. V'amar Rabbi. He says if you put you have if you on one side of the vines you plant a vineyard, so can you go on the other side? Samarlo be'aser mutter be'yasim yaser aser. If the trees were far from one another, in other words, where the vines were hanging was 10 or less, then it'll be mutter. But if not, then it's more. If it's more than 10, then it will be aser. So we see that he learned from him that more than 10 is aser. Tzarsa Pesach does not work. The vines don't work when it comes to Kilayim. And b'mayas kinan ilem al gabon. If we're talking about on top, yasim yaser aser. Are you talking about that more than 10? If it's on top, it is no good. So how you sham kanim ha dokranim. So he said over there that let's say you had poles in the ground, and then you made basically a vine, right, a wound vine on top. Even if it was more than 10, it would be mutter, right? As the elolach. So rather, we can't be talking about if it's on top. Rather, it must be minat sad. And there, nevertheless, we see that minat sad. He says only for 10 or less, then it's mutter, but more than 10, it would be aser. Indeed, learn from here that so by kilayim, right? It always works unless it's minat sad and more than 10. Then Rabbi Yechon would say it doesn't work, and that was the case where he said just like Shabbos is no good, so too kilayim is no good. Fine, 2 dots. Gufa. So Amar Rav Chizda Tzuras HaPesach Shas Min Asad Lo Asav Lo Iklum. Right, Tzuras HaPesach was made on the side. If the crossbeam is not on top of the poles, right on side posts, rather it's in the middle. It's nothing. Rav Chizda Tzuras HaPesach Jamro Sri Chashdei Beria Kedei Lahamid Badelas the Afilu Delas Shel Kashin. Right. In other words, you have to be able. It has to be strong enough to be able to hold a door. Right, it has to be a legit door frame, and even if the door is made of kashin, of a very light straw, but it has to be a door of some sort that has to be able to hold, even if it doesn't have a door. Right, so it doesn't need a door; it just needs to be a door frame. Right, but it has to be strong enough, a door frame, to potentially put a door there. Amar Rish Lakish Mishum Rabbi Yanai. Tzarsa Pesach tzricha heker tzir. It needs a heker tzir. So my heker tzir, what is a heker tzir? So he says, Amar Avavia avakasa, right? It means like a hole to put a hinge, right? You know, the doors, I guess they would, the hole in the ground, they would come in and then they'll be able to turn, right, via the door. So in other words, it has to have an ability to have basically an area to put the hinge next to it in order to be able to place a door there. And Ashkazidu Ravak.
I have a question. When we put up Tzurasa Pesach for an Eruv, the posts are less than 10, but they're not suspending anything. And it's just a wire, so it's not going to be strong enough to suspend it.
Right. It's not a korah, right? It's not a beam, right? We will soon see a beam has to be a certain tvachim.
It's Tzurasa Pesach.
So we'll get into that. We're not right. We're right, but we have to understand right why that's different. So fine, but
Yeah,
that's
so
not.
why are they saying here that it has to be sturdy?
Because this is what the halach is by Tzoras Pesach. You want to ask, how the Eruv, you can call many Orthodox rabbis.
No, Tzoras Pesach. I want to
I
understand.
understand. So Tzoras Pesach, as we're defining here, has to close up a mavui, right? And it has to, what's it called? It has to be a door frame, according to those who, whether 10 or not, it depends if it works, but it has to be a legit door frame with the ability to place a door there. That's what it's saying here. So, fine. So, Ashachinu Rav Acha Berei de Rav Avia, Latami de Rav Ashi. So I said, if you don't understand what's going on with the common Eruv, ask whoever put up the Eruv and ask your question, right? But I'm saying, but this Gemara here does not pertain, right? We're talking about at Tzoras Pesach with a Mavui in terms of opening up into a Rishus Harabim. So Ashachinu de Rav Acha Berei de Rav Avia, Latami de Rav Ashi. So he said to the Tamid of Rav Ashi, Samarlu, Amar Mar Midi b'Tzoras Pesach. Have you learned anything regarding Tzoras Pesach? Amar Le Lo Amar Klum. He didn't say anything about it. He didn't say any requirements. And Tanat Tzoras Pesach L'Shamru Kana Mikan V'Kana Mikan V'Kana Al Gabeha. You need one pole on one side, one on the other side, and a pole on top. Tzrichen Legia. Oh, ain't Tzrichen Legia. Does it have to touch it or not? So Rav Nachman Amar ain't Tzrichen Legia. Rav Sheshes Amar Tzrichen Legia. Right. So Rav Nachman says he do not have to make contact. It has to make contact. The pole on top to the pole underneath it. And Rav Sheish says, he says it does not have to, and Rav Nachman says it does not have to, and Rav Sheish says it does have to. And Azal Rav Nachman of Avid Uvda Bei Reish Galusa Kishmaitze. So Rav Nachman, who held that he doesn't have to go ahead and touch, so he went ahead and he built basically a Tzoras Pesach without it touching. And Amar Le Rav Sheish is the Shamei, right? So it says Rav Sheish to Shamish, to Rav Gada, Zil Shav Shadinu, right? Go ahead and take the Reish Galusa's pole and lower it down and make sure it makes contact with the pole underneath it. So Azal Shav Shadinu, so he went in and did it. And Ashchiu Debei Reish Galusa in Chavshu. So those of the Reish Galusa, they found that he was basically touching the property of the Reish Galusa, right? That had Exilarch. And they threw him like in jail, right, for trespassing and touching the private property of the Reish Galusa. So also Rav Sheshes come above. So Rav Sheshes came, who was the one who instructed him to tell him to lower it. And Amrle got the pukta. He says, "Go, you can leave nafik v'yasa." Then he left, and basically he went to Rav Sheshes on his own. Rather, he did it per the orders of Rav Sheshes. And Ashkina Rav Sheshes, the Rabbi Bar Shmuel, Rav Sheshes found the Rabbi Bar Shmuel. So Amalei, he said to him, so Tani Ma, immediately Tzoras Pesach, right? Did you teach anything regarding Tzoras Pesach? So Amalei, he said, yeah. Tanina, we learned in a brayso that says kippah. So when it comes to a kippah is basically a rounded entrance, right? There is no frame like goes up and top, or rather it's like an archway, right? A rounded archway. Those of you who have the pictures on the side of the Rashi. Rashi has a kippah there. The Arshba also has a picture, right? And the bottom left is the picture there, but the Rashi has a picture over there. So you see, so that is a kippah. So Rabbi Meir B'chai Mezuzah. Rabbi Meir is a chai Mezuzah. B'chai Paichim B'chai say you're pater from Mezuzah, right? Because it's not a real entranceway, right? It's not a real. The Shavin Sheim Yesh B'Ragleh Asara Shei Chayvus. However, they both agree that the part that goes up, these are called the legs of the what's it called? The legs of the rounded top, right? So if it goes up first, if it goes up 10 tefachim, and then it starts to round, so therefore now it's considered to be an entranceway because, right, it already went 10 up. So it's not like it's rounded from the beginning, rather it goes up and then it goes out. So there, everyone agreed that it is chayiv for a mezuzah. Now, Amar Abaye, Hakol Maidim im Gavo Asar Ve'ein B'Ragla Shleisha. Everyone agrees, right? If it's not 10 tall, and also the part until it starts to round is not even 3 tefachim, everyone agrees in that case. It does not require or inami or yesh b'ragla shleisha ve'enu gavasar. Or even if it does go up 3, but it never gets to the height, the peak on top of the arch is not 10 v'loy klub. It's not nothing. It's not considered to be an entranceway. Would not be m'chayv a mezuzah. So ki pligi when they argue yesh b'ragla shleisha ve'gavo asar. When it goes up at least 3 tefachim from the legs, and the height of the top is 10 tefachim. Ve'ein rach va'arba. Right, but on top where it gets 10, right, it already starts to round. At the 10 tefachim point, right, the 10 tefachim high point, it already starts to round. So therefore, at the 10 tefachim point, it's not 4 away, and therefore, right, the arch comes into it. right? And you can go ahead and basically, if you want to go ahead and chisel out, right, an area of 10 by 4 into the archway, there's enough space there, right? Like those of you who have the picture in the arts in the art scroll, right? You can see that there's space over there, right, to go ahead and chisel out and basically carve out an entrance of 10 up and 4 across. So 10 by 4 tefachim. So over there, so Rameir holds you to go ahead. Since you have the ability to go ahead and carve it out, so therefore it's like it's carved out, and therefore it's chayim mezuzah. Rabban and Sabri, no, since the entranceway is not 4 by 10, rather it's covered by brick, we don't go ahead and say carve it out, and therefore it would be pater from mezuzah. So Amar Le, so he said to him, if you find that, so he said to him that, I guess the argument, the Bryce, right? Don't say anything to the house of the Shklusa, because I guess this Brysa was different than that which they had, right? That which they had, because remember, Rav Sheshes was the one who taught this, right? Rav Sheshes was the one who taught this brisa that said the Tzuras Pesach in terms of the requirements, and since he said they want to lower it down, so therefore he said that in this case he holds that lahashlim. So he said to Rabbi Shmuel. So he tells them how he says, don't tell the Reish Galusa, right? That this case of, I guess, this brisa, because this brisa doesn't seem to say that they have to touch, right? We said before it has to touch, but as long as it's high and the poles, because the poles on the side, they don't really touch because it's really in the stone. Only if you carve it out, right? That's when the top meets the side, right? But if it's, if it's rounded over here and it's in the stone, they don't really meet, in open space. If you hold like the Chachamim, not like Rameir, and therefore this would be more like the Reish Galusa, who held that the two don't need to meet. And they don't need to meet, so therefore he said basically, even though I hold that they should meet, don't tell them this brisa, because then this brisa sort of argues with me. Fine. Let's see the Mishnah, how much time we have. Let's just do the Mishnah, then we'll continue from the Mishnah tomorrow. So,
Anai Mishnah.
This is the second Mishnah of Erevin. So Hechshem Mavoi. So we actually discussed many of this to go ahead and to machshir a Mavoi. Beis Shammai Yomim Lechi v'Kora. Beis Shammai says you need, right, you have a Mavoi, have an entranceway into the Shazarabim, so he says you need a lechi and a kora. You need a side post and a beam. Beis Hillel says no, you need one or the other, either a lechi or a kora. Rabbi Eliezer Aimer lechin meshum. He says you need two of them, right? And Meshum Rabbi Shmuel Amar Tamid Echad Lifnei Rabbi Kiva Nechel Beis Shammai Beis Hillel Amav Shehu Pachos Me'arba Amos. They don't argue about it regarding a mavui that's not 4 amos deep. Shehu nitar abulacha b'kora. They both agree in that case you need either a lechi or a kora. Alman nechel. So what do they argue? Al rachav me'arba. It's at least 4 amos wide. V'ad eser up until 10. Right, more than 10 we saw in the first mission. It's no good. So 4 until 10. Beis Shammai Yomim Lechi v'kora. In that case, Beis Shammai says either a lechi or kora. You need you need both. Excuse me, a lechi and a kora. Beis Hillel Yomim oy lechi o kora. Beis Hillel says no. Or a lechi, or a kor, one or the other. Now Rabbi Kiva, alzev, Rabbi Kiva says no. In both cases, they argue, even if it's less than 4. And we'll have to see that in the Gemara, and I guess we'll stop here. So tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, will continue from here. Everyone have a wonderful day. Shkoyach.
Yeah, Shkoyach. Good Chodesh. Good Chodesh.
Good Chodesh.